Lately, besides 252's release into the hands of subscribers and people reading summaries and everything about it, one of the other things that people are talking about is the whole situation with Ken Penders. Now, Ken Penders and Archie Comics obviously have agreed to some kind of settlement to the point that in various reprints, like the sticker book edition of the Super Special magazine, some of the archives, some of the digests, that we're starting to see some of his characters, like Archie, Lara-Su, Linda, Remington. We're starting to see all these characters that Penders created reappear. And we're not seeing any more pages being edited or cut out. But despite that, according to several sources, one, it seems Ken Penders' children will be inheriting his creations, should he ever pass on. And secondly, it seems that according to what some people are saying, and you can see the title down below, it states that apparently, and I mean apparently, that not only can Archie use the characters and thus pay Penders some royalties out of this agreement or settlement, but according to some people, the reason we're in the situation we are now, the reboot, the recons, or the soft reboot, the retcons, and all that, is due to the fact that, well, not only to make clear things up and make space, it makes things more simpler and straightforward, but more along the line to make sure, I guess, certain things that Penders had done in the past, not just characters, I don't think characters as much, but more than likely events do not happen or do not become canon or become official. Well, there's a problem with it. Well, you see, that is the problem that some people are looking at with this whole joint agreement between both sides. You see, they feel Archie Comics will use, I think, just like they do, that Archie Comics will use the characters, but they don't want to use them to the point that they have to acknowledge the Lara-Su Chronicles that Ken Penders is working on as canon. In other words, they'll use the characters, but they don't want to acknowledge the Mobius Years later timeline as canon. I mean, let's not forget, Ian Flynn came out and said himself, along with a few others, that he doesn't look at Mobius Years later as being canon. But yet, according to what they're saying here, Archie will and can use the characters, but they have to, in a way, acknowledge that the future timeline in which the Lara-Su Chronicles are based around is indeed canon. Now, I had a feeling, I said this many times when I talked about this whole situation, I had a feeling that that was going to be one of the reasons. One of the reasons why Ken Penders did what he did and vice versa. That basically, he probably heard Ian Flynn, and this is nothing against Ian Flynn, because I can understand where he's coming from. But pretty much, he probably heard what Ian Flynn and some others said about that storyline, that timeline, and probably thought, well, wait a minute. If they're not going to use my character, if they're not going to acknowledge Mobius Years later as canon, then why are they even using my characters if they're not going to acknowledge what could be? Or something like that. But pretty much that's part of the agreement. Like, hey, you can use the characters as long as you pay me some royalties. Maybe, I'm thinking that's what it is. Pay him some royalties. Maybe not much, but pay him something. But in exchange, also, ladies and gentlemen, in exchange, also, if you will, acknowledge that the future timeline is canon. And like I said in previous videos, I had a feeling that was I had a feeling that was the whole situation. But again, I can kind of understand where Ian Flynn and several others, people that have worked on the comic, are coming from. I can understand the fact that they feel that, hey, if we acknowledge Mobius years later as canon, we're pretty much giving away the fact that, one, they defeated Eggman, two, as much as not a huge majority, but a majority of fans, basically like, say, a strong majority, not a massive majority, but a strong majority of fans would be upset with seeing Sonic and Sally together and married, which two is against Sega's restrictions, and three, Tails and Mina being a pairing. Pretty much he doesn't see that because Tails is younger than Mina, or Mina, whatever you call it. See, the point is, ladies and gentlemen, the point is this. See, the point is this, folks. As much as we want to see the characters come back, and they will come back, believe you me, you cannot just take out key characters like Julie-Su, Saffron B, Linda, Archie's mom, Lara-Su, or whatever, Lala Lee. Yeah, Lala Lee. You cannot just take them out. And Remington, you cannot just take them out and say, oh, they're gone. You can't take out Jeffrey St. John just like that. You can't take Hershey the Cat out just like that and say, oh, well, they never existed. No. Basically, it's more along the lines of the fact, ladies and gentlemen. It's more along the lines of the fact, that Archie, it's more along the lines of the fact that Archie will use them, but they don't want to have to, but as much as they're going to use them, they don't want to have to acknowledge the Mobius years timeline as canon, because if they do, they're pretty much giving away the fact that Eggman's defeated, he's gone, Sonic and Sally, against Sega's wishes, are married, even if it's just the future. Tails and Mina, and stuff, all this kind of stuff. And I don't think they want to go through with that. My honest opinion is they want to use Julie-Su, they want to use Jeffrey St. John, they want to use Remington, they want to use Linda, they want to use all the Pender-related characters, major Pender-related characters that they can, but they don't want to acknowledge Mobius years later as canon, because it pretty much gives away that the Freedom Fighters beat Robotnik, or beat Eggman. Now I could be wrong. Maybe they would agree to acknowledge it. But I know Ian Flynn, who's the main writer, would not be happy about it. He would not be happy that he'd be told, oh, by the way, you know that Mobius years later, Ian, that you kind of continued and finalized? And I can see Ian go like, yeah? Guess what? That's now canon. Huh? But it gives everything away. Well, we're going to use these characters again. Like you and all these fans want to use, seem to be used. It's canon. So yeah. Basically, as much as Ian would hate to hear it, he may have to acknowledge it too. But again, I don't know. I'm not saying they wouldn't acknowledge, Mobius years later storyline as canon, or timeline as canon. I'm not saying they wouldn't. But I believe that's one of the reasons they're kind of reluctant right now to use the characters. I'm not saying we're not going to see the characters again in future issues of the main comic universe. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I'm not going to be surprised that during this timeline, during this time frame from now to the end of the year, and if not into 2014, that when they finally do bring them in, or bring them back in, that it's either going to be, that they're either going to, have an agreement to where they can use them, but they don't have to acknowledge Mobius years later as canon, or two, they're going to be bringing them back in, which they will, and they will have to acknowledge it. But again, I believe they're going to do their best to not acknowledge it because they know their head writer, Ian Flynn, and other people that have worked on the book or currently working on the book, don't want to acknowledge a future timeline which pretty much spoils the outcome of this war between Eggman and the Freedom Fighters as canon. They don't want to do that. So, again, though, that's pretty much what's going on with the whole. Will we see Julie Sue? Will we see Jeffrey? Will we see Remington? Will we see Linda? Will we see Lara-Su? Will we see Lala Lee? You know, will we see these characters again? And my answer is yes, we'll see them again. It's just that it's either going to be, we're either going to see them again with either A, no acknowledgement of the future timeline as canon, or 2, not with acknowledgement that the future timeline is canon. Just saying. So, give me your thoughts on it. What do you think will happen? What do you think will happen? But comment below if you like. But basically, that is one of the big news items coming out this week. But let me know what you guys think. I'd like to hear your response. Comment below, and I'll talk to you all later. And I'm sorry for the bird in the background.